Like Pastor Kyle was saying last week, he started our new series in the book of Joshua. This is the first time in 2 years I haven't had to preach on a Mark. So it's like a bittersweet kind of thing. It feels a little weird. I've just been so used to being in Mark. But we're starting through Joshua. And last week, Pastor Kyle preached about how Joshua is taking over. He's taking charge of the Israelites, and about how our future is not determined by our past chains. Today we're going to continue through the book of Joshua in Joshua 2, and I'm super excited. So quick story time. When I was back in 2019, I was interning at my former church in Washington, and at the same time trying to balance a football career. I just got done with college football a couple years before, and I still thought I could make it and do something with it, and so I was playing semi-pro, started playing arena football, and I got this opportunity to play in the CFL. If you don't know what the CFL is, it's like the NFL, but in Canada. So it's not as good because it's Canadian. But that's what I was doing. And so I went to my pastor and I was like, I don't know how to balance this ministry on top of football. Like, I don't know what to do. I feel like God's calling me into ministry, but like football's been a big part of my life. Played 18 years. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And we sat there and prayed about it, and we thought that we could use it as a way of its own ministry, being able to reach a different group of people in a different setting. And I thought I was walking in faith by continuing to play football. And so before my CFL workout, I had a couple months. I was in the gym all the time. I was doing 2-a-days by myself, conditioning. I hate running, but I was running, just trying to get in the best shape I possibly could. I put on 20 pounds on purpose, not on accident, as an offensive lineman. I felt like I could move the same, do all these same things, and so I was working towards this big goal, and I was trusting in God to deliver me through this. So I get to the CFL tryout, okay, and I'm warming up. I'm feeling great. The very first thing that we have is a 40-yard dash. I've done 1,000 of them my entire life, and the very first exercise, on the very first rep, I was 10 steps in and felt like 3 pops on the bottom of my foot. And then I took a couple more steps and felt some more pops, and then all of a sudden I was on the ground and I couldn't walk. And so what I thought was a walk in faith with, going where the direction I thought God had me, he's like, no, you're not doing that, you're going somewhere else. But if it wasn't for that, for one thing, I wouldn't have met my wife. I wouldn't be here with y'all. I would have never moved down to Texas. I'd be up in Canada, and who knows how that could be. So today we're going to be talking about faith. Today's all about faith. So I'm going to read a lot of scripture, so bear with me. We're reading all of Joshua 2, so go ahead and open it up if you don't have it. Open up your phones, Bibles. If not, it'll also be on the screen. So bear with me. Like I said, it's a lot of reading. Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 men as spies from Acacia Grove, saying, go and scout the land, especially Jericho. So they left and came to the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. The king of Jericho was told, look, some of the Israelite men have come here tonight to investigate the land. Then the king of Jericho sent word to Rahab, saying, bring out the men who came to you, entered your house, for they have come to investigate the entire land. But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. So she said, yes, the men did come to me, but I didn't know where they were from. At nightfall, when the city gate was about to close, the men went out, and I didn't know where they were going. Chase after them quickly, and you can catch up with them. But she had taken them up to the roof and hid them among the stalks of flax that she had arranged on the roof. The men pursued along the road to the fords of the Jordan, and as soon as they left to pursue them, the city gate shut. Before the men fell asleep, she went up to the roof and said to them, I know the Lord has given you this land, and the terror of you has fallen on us, and everyone who lives in this land is panicking because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the 2 Amorite kings you completely destroyed across the Jordan. When we heard this, we lost heart, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and earth below. Now please swear to me by the Lord that you will also show kindness to my father's family because I have showed kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father, mother, brothers, sisters, and all who belong to them, and save us from death. The men answered her, we will give our lives for yours if you don't repeat our mission. We will show kindness and faithfulness to you when the Lord gives us the land." Then she let them down by a rope through the window, since she lived at a house that was built into the wall of the city. "Go to the hill country, so the men pursuing you won't find you," she said to them. "Hide there for 3 days until I return. Afterward, go on your way." The men said to her, "We will be free from this oath you made us swear, unless when we enter the land you tie a scarlet cord to the window through which you let us down. Bring your father, mother, brothers, and your father's family into your house. If anyone goes out the doors of your house, his death will be his own fault, and we will be innocent. But if anyone you let in the house should be harmed, his death will be our fault. And if you report our mission, we are free from the oath you made us swear." "Let it be as you say," she replied, and she sent them away. After they had gone, she had tied the scarlet cord to the window. The two men went to the hill country and stayed there for 3 days until the pursuers had returned. They searched all along the way but did not find them. Then the men returned, came down to the hill country, crossed the Jordan. They went to Joshua, son of Nun, and reported everything that had happened to them. They told Joshua, "The Lord has handed over the entire land to us. Everyone who lives in the land is panicking because of us." It's a lot of verses. So today we're going to do things a little different when it comes to the sermon. Kyle typically does these 1-point sermons. Today we're going to have 3 points. So if you take notes, however you do it, there's going to be 3 big faith statements that I have for you, okay? The first one is faith requires trust in God's plan. Okay, so you see, verse 1, Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies as spies from Acacia Grove, saying, "Go and scout the land, especially Jericho." See, this isn't the first time that the Israelites have sent spies into the promised land. If you look 40 years earlier, Moses sent 12 spies into the land, and the goal was to see what the land looked like, if it was good, fertile land, what the people were like, who were there, their numbers, were they strong, were their cities fortified, just find out what was going on. And when they went out there, they stayed there for 40 days, 40 nights, and they came back and talked about how great the land was. All 12 of them, they're like, "It's great, it's fertile, here are some grapes." They showed just how good the land was. They said it was a land flowing with milk and honey. But 10 out of the 12 were like, "We cannot do this. We will be destroyed. They have giants. Their cities are great. We have no chance." The giants are like, we're like grasshoppers compared to them. And out of the 12, there was only 2 people who had believed that they could take the land, and that was Joshua and Caleb. I also want to point out that these people that are doubting are also the same people that just not too long ago God brought out of slavery, out of Egypt. They're the same people who crossed the Red Sea dry, and they are still doubting what God could do. So here in Numbers 14, when it's telling the story, it says, Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, who were among those who scouted the land, tore their clothes and said to the entire Israelite community. I just want to time out. If me and Kyle get to the point where we're stressing something to you, to the point where we're taking off our clothes, please listen. Okay, I don't want to get it to that point. Like, that's how serious they were about this. It says, they tore off their clothes and said to the entire Israelite community, "The land we passed through and explored is extremely good land. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will bring us into the land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and give it to us. Only don't rebel against the Lord and don't be afraid of the people of the land, for we will devour them. Their protection has been removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Don't be afraid of the people of the land." While the whole community threatened to stone them, the glory of the Lord appeared to the Israelites at a tent in meeting. So as they're saying all this, these people are planning to stone Joshua and Caleb. They were saying, it would be better for us to have stayed in Egypt. Let's go back to Egypt, because we're about to face is not okay. We are not going to survive. And because of their lack of faith in God, God said, anyone over the age of 20, except for Joshua and Caleb, you won't make it into the promised land. And so you fast forward 40 years, here we are. And it says that Joshua secretly sent 2 spies. Joshua learned from the mistakes of the past. He's looking at it and says, well, last time we sent 12, everybody knew about it, and everybody started doubting, and look where it got us. So he secretly sent 2 spies in. He didn't want that same mistake to happen. There was too many people that doubted, and so the purpose of sending them in was not to see if they could do it. Joshua had complete faith in God. He's shown that already. What he's doing is seeing what they were going to be up against. Okay? Let's fast forward to verse 8. I'm going to skip a couple verses, and then we'll get back to verse 2. But it says, "Before the men fell asleep, she went up to the roof and said to them, 'I know that the Lord has given you this land, and the terror of you has fallen on us, and everyone who lives in the land is panicking because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Shin and Og, the Amorite kings you completely destroyed across the Jordan. When we heard this, we lost heart, and everyone's courage because of you, for the Lord, your God, is God as in heaven above and on earth.'" All Rahab had to do was hear the stories of what God did for the Israelites. She didn't see it. She didn't need proof. She heard it. She said, "We have heard what the Lord did." She could have easily been like everybody else in Jericho and been afraid. Was like, "I don't want to do this. I don't want to deal with God." But faith is a choice. When I was in college, we did our winter conditioning, and it was like 16 weeks of you just hate your life. Like, it's awful. You're waking up at 4 or 5 o'clock every day, and you hear stories as a freshman. Throughout the whole season, you're like, winter conditioning's coming, and it's terrible. Winter conditioning's coming, it's terrible. And you could see like how everybody's face just looks defeated. I remember there was a guy, his name was Caleb, and speaking of Caleb, his name was Caleb, and he was a senior, and so for the senior night, we do a bonfire. The seniors stand around. They have a object that they put in the fire, and they talk about how it affected them throughout their time playing college football. Then we take the ashes and use that for our face paint for our senior night. And I remember him talking about winter conditioning. He's like, "Freshmen, you've heard stories. You know how bad it is. Do it anyway." And in that moment, to me, that was like a revelation of, okay, I know it's going to be awful. Everybody's talked about it. I have to do it anyway. And as you're going through it, you're like, I don't see the purpose in all of this. You have people throwing up all over the place. You're dragging chains. You're running. You're lifting heavy weight. You're like, I don't get it. But at the end, you trust the process, and at the end, you're like, okay, maybe I do have a little bit of abs there, a little bit, You get stronger, faster. All these things that you didn't see, you had to trust in what the coaches were doing in the same thing. And it's the same thing in our faith. When we feel like God's plan for our lives, we don't see it. We don't see the point. We don't see the purpose. We have to continue to trust. Even if it seems big, we have to look back at the time in our lives that God has brought us through situation for his purpose. We got to look at his character. Pastor Kyle talks about it. He's been talking about it all the time. Look at the character of God, what he does, what he's done for others and folks around you, and just continue to trust in that. If our church is planning to move into Devonshire, and we believe that it's truly part of God's plan for us, we have to also trust that he is preparing a way for us into the community. I fully believe that God is working in people's hearts in the community to open up their doors to us, to host community groups. I believe that there's families that are going to come to the Lord because of us moving into the community. But those things are things that we don't have control over, but we just have to trust in God's plan and be obedient when he calls us to do it. Which brings me to my next faith statement, which is faith requires action. Going back to verse 2. So they left and came to the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. The king of Jericho was told, "Look, some of the Israelite men have come here tonight to investigate the land." Then the king of Jericho sent word to Rahab, "Bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, for they have come to investigate the entire land." But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them, so she said, "Yes, the men did come to me, but I didn't know where they were from. At nightfall, when the city gate was about to close, they went out. And I don't know where they were going. Chase after them quickly, and you can catch up to them." But she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them among the stalks of flax. The men pursued them along the road to the fords of Jordan. As soon as they left to pursue them, the city gate was shut. Here we see Rahab's faith in action. We see her lying to the king and hiding the men at risk to her own life. She didn't just claim that God, their God, was Lord, but she showed it in her actions with hiding them and then continuing to tie the scarlet cord in the window. If I one day had a mental breakdown and decided to put on a Dallas Cowboys jersey for whatever reason, okay, and say I'm a part of the Dallas Cowboys, what are you going to tell me? You're not a part of the Dallas Cowboys. I may look like I'm a part of the Cowboys, but I'm not. If I went to the meetings, if I signed a contract, if I practiced, if I did the workouts, if I played on Sundays, we could be like, yeah, you're on the team. That was one of the things that would drive me crazy in college. People would come up to me like, man, we played really great on Saturday. Or, man, we played really bad. It's like, you weren't playing. You're not part of the team. You didn't do anything in order to be considered on the team. And our daily walks are the same. Okay, we shouldn't live a life of claiming to be a Christian but not putting it into action. Listen, if Kyle, myself, Pastor Clay, Pastor Josh, if we're not pushing you to live out your faith, we have failed you as pastors. If Jason, Steve, Carl, Kevin, our deacons, if they are not pushing you to live out your faith in action, they have failed you as deacons. And listen to my heart in this. We do this because we love you, okay? So if you get annoyed of me coming up to you every week and saying, hey, you coming to this? You doing this? You going to volunteer here? I do that because I love you. So hear me when I say this. If you're comfortable with showing up to church on Sunday and just going through the motions during the week, you need to rethink that thought process. Because God has placed you here in this church for a specific purpose. You all have gifts and talents that you can all use to glorify God. So, for example, we're going to be doing a bunch of events in Devonshire. Haley Mosley is going to be she likes acting and improv. She's going to be hosting a acting and improv lesson open to the community of Devonshire. I'm going to be doing a sports camp. But outside of like personal skills, there are so many opportunities to serve in the church, and then, like I said, especially when we go into Devonshire, you just have to be open to it. But then there's also just this living your life for God on a daily basis, praying, fasting, being in your word, showing up to church on Sundays, being generous, helping people in the community. There's so many different ways to do it. You just have to be open to live your life full of action in your faith. And the last faith statement I have for you is, faith brings testimony. I think we underestimate the power of our testimonies. So I don't know about y'all, but when I read the Bible, I tend to picture myself as all the great people, okay? When I read David and Goliath, sometimes I think I'm Goliath, just because he's a big dude. I'm a big dude. Anytime that we do something with kids, I'm always Goliath and throw marshmallows at me. But most of the time, I think I'm David. I think I'm the dude out there slaying giants, okay? When I read Joshua, Joshua's talked about he's wise. He has a spirit of wisdom. He's a great leader. Sometimes I think I am. My wife might say something different, but when I read it, I feel myself in there. But all reality, I'm Rahab. I'm a prostitute. Not because I am or have been a prostitute, but because I have had a very sinful past, very sinful life. And you know what? That's not a bad thing. The fundamental narrative of Joshua 2 is God taking the ultimate outsider, a prostitute, Gentile woman, and bringing her into the kingdom of God. At one point, all of us were outside the kingdom. Ephesians 2:12, at that time you were without the Messiah, excluded from the citizenship of Israel and foreigners to the covenant of the promise, without hope and without God in the world. But now in Christ, you who were far away have been brought near by the blood of the Messiah. So, there was this men's conference, okay? And I don't know who's ever been to a male's conference, a female conference, any sort of conference. They always start off with like, everybody's in one big group. They talk a little bit, and then there's breakout sessions. Well, at this one, they let everybody who had a breakout session, who was leading one, come up and give like 5 minutes of what was going to be going on. So the first guy gets up on stage, and he has like a bunch of swords and knives, and he's talking about how you can use forging as a way to reach men in different ways. You had a guy come up from Power Team, and he ripped a phone book in half and was bending frying pans Maybe I should do that. But he was bending frying pans and talking about how you can use your strength in your body in order to glorify God and reach people around you. Same thing, you had people with bow and arrows, hunting, all sorts of stuff. But then you have this guy walk up on stage, and I'm talking men's conference, okay, in Texas, bunch of manly men, okay? You have a dude get up on stage with a pink shirt and white pants, and he goes, "Hey, guys!" And you can feel the tension in the room get real tight. And he goes on to tell the story of how he was living a homosexual lifestyle. He was was living with his boyfriend. One time his boyfriend went out of town. He had a friend invite him to church. And so he's like, well, my boyfriend's out of town, might as well. Went to church, heard the gospel, got saved. After church, him and his friend are sitting in the car, and she's like, so are you not gay anymore? He's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I just found this out. And so he continues to go and starts studying scripture and eventually decides to leave that lifestyle in the past, moves out of his boyfriend's house, loses all of his friends because they were all within the community, separates from that completely. Then goes on to talk about where he's at now. He has a wife, 3 kids, and just telling this incredible, powerful story, and everybody in the room's crying. Breakout groups happen, and there's a line just out the door waiting to see what else he has to say because he gets to travel the world and talk about how God brought him from A to B. Listen, we all have a testimony of who we were before Christ and who we were after Christ. Whether it's your testimony is pain from abusive childhood, a past trauma, addiction, a sin you struggle with, it could all glorify God. Whatever you've been through, no matter how damaging, no matter how bad it hurt you, how much you hurt someone else, no matter how ugly it makes you feel on the inside, you can glorify God. Here, let's look at, Brian, go ahead and come up. Let's look at here, it says in Matthew, okay? Abraham fathered Isaac. Isaac fathered Jacob. Jacob fathered Judah and his brothers. Judah fathered Perez, Zerah by Tamar. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron followed Aram. Aram followed Amminadab. Amminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Solomon. Solomon fathered Boaz by Rahab. And if you continue down, skip 30 verses, it says, Jacob fathered Joseph, the husband of Mary, who gave birth to Jesus, who was called the Messiah. That's the genealogy of Jesus. The faith of a prostitute led to the birth of the Messiah. Our testimonies can change the world. That guy, he gets to go preach the gospel all over the place. He gets to talk about how our sinful nature separates us from Christ. There's nothing or from God. There's nothing that we could do, say, give, offer to God in order to reconcile with him. But Christ loved us so much, he sent his son to live a perfect life that we couldn't do. He was beaten, mocked, spit on, and hung on a cross. And 3 days later, rose from the dead to prove that he was God. Romans 10:9 says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Everything that you do in your life is a choice. You could choose to follow God, you could choose to have faith in God, or you can choose not to. I pray that if you haven't chose to put your faith in God, that you do, and if you have, that you continue to.